Good evening. It is lovely to be in this beautiful city of Bristol. I'll try and break with the other people who've been up first and try and actually stick to that 10 minutes for my session. But really, Greg was very much on time, apparently. Okay. My message to you this evening is this, that on this agenda, I genuinely believe Labour is the only show in town. But before I say that, let me say about the two colleagues from the coalition who you've heard from already tonight. I don't doubt the personal commitment of Greg or Ed to this agenda whatsoever. I really don't. But I want you to think of it like this. Imagine you're having a party and you're inviting all your friends who care about this, and you think to yourselves, let's invite those two nice chaps we met at Big Green Week. Let's invite Ed and Greg along to the party. And it gets to the day of the party, and the doorbell rings, and your partner goes to the door, and just before they're about to open it, they're expecting Greg and Ed, and they freeze in horror. And you say, what is it? And they look through the little peephole, and they say, you won't believe what's happened. You won't believe who they've brought with them. And yes, it's everyone's nightmare, because Eric Pickles is standing right behind them. But hang on, it's going to get worse. Because who's just behind Eric? That's right, it's Owen Paterson, our Environment Secretary, who's still not convinced about climate change. As England lies under floodwater, you've got to wonder what Owen is waiting for to convince him. But actually, there's another twist. Because they haven't come by public transport, sadly not. They've all come together, it's a coalition. But who has driven the car here? That's right, George Osborne has driven them here together. And that's really the problem with this coalition government. It's got brilliant rhetoric, but the reality isn't there. And actually, at best, they pursued this agenda, I think, quite begrudgingly. And at worst, there's been a great deal of hypocrisy, where they've said the right things, but it's simply not been followed up. The Conservatives are proposing a ban on offshore wind. I think that is absolutely misplaced. But that ban is happening now, while these people are in office. Eric Pickles uses the planning system to ban onshore wind development, and I cannot believe we're going down that route. Look at the changes to undermine the solar industry. Just announced another round of changes. Again, what we're saying to people is, let's subsidise these technologies till they get cost effective, and then we'll pull the rug from underneath them. That is not the way to proceed. And there has been, I'll acknowledge Greg's point, there has been a large deployment of rooftop solar under this government over the last 4 years, and we should thank the government for that. But I think, to be honest, that's the Chinese government, because it's their commitment to this and long-term planning that has seen the cost of solar come down. And worst of all, we have those comments from the Prime Minister about cutting the green crap. Now, I think that portrayed so much about the thinking of the government behind the scenes, and I think everyone felt, really let down by that. And I don't just mean because then I became, by default, the shadow minister for green crap. But we're talking about the future tonight. We could look back at the government, and I'll just say a couple of things, because I think those points have to be answered. And I'll not just stick to energy. We have the badger cull. They didn't kill enough badgers originally, so then they moved on to gassing them. We had privatising the forests. Where did that come from? Thankfully, we managed to beat that one back. We've had the rollback on zero-carbon homes in the Queen's speech. I cannot, for the life of me, fathom what the logic is behind that when we've got to retrofit so many properties, so we're going to diminish the standards that we make new build to. We've had opposing the EU fuel labelling directive, which targeted the tar sands oil. And worst of all, we've had scrapping the Sustainable Development Commission, but that's probably because that was the body that would have held them to account as to whether they would be the greenest government ever. In 2012, the UK dropped out of the top 5 places to invest in renewable energy for the first time. And I don't recognise Ed Davies' figures whatsoever about the rosy picture he paints. But in contrast, we don't just see this as the right thing to do. Actually, we see this as a huge opportunity. I reject also Jonathan's assessment that there's a trade-off between pursuing growth and high living standards for people and pursuing this agenda. My constituency is on the east side of Manchester, still one of the great manufacturing parts of this country. I've got a company there that at the minute makes turbines for the oil and gas industry in the North Sea, and soon they're switching that development, that work, that expertise to building the parts, the turbines for the tidal lagoons in Swansea and in places like here. I see that as an opportunity, and I think if we portray the two things as being in conflict, actually we make a massive mistake. There are very few areas of this country's economy where we have a positive balance of trade with China. Yet the green economy is one of them. And you don't just hear on our side these points from me. You hear them from people like Chuka Ramuna, who's our shadow business secretary. Every time he makes a speech about skills, about industrial policy, it's this agenda that he is promoting. And I believe, you might think I'm a hopeless optimist, but I believe eventually all countries will see sense on this, that they will recognize that the science is so compelling, that this is the only place to be, even countries where it's very difficult right now, like Australia and Canada. And so it will be the countries who've got this first, the early adopters, that I think will really reap the benefits of that. And I'm actually amazed when I go into schools in my constituency, not just by how much people care about this, young people, but actually how much they know. They know a lot more than a lot of backbench members, frankly, of the House of Commons. And we should take that as a very positive sign as to our direction of travel. And that's why Labour in office passed the Climate Change Act in 2008, groundbreaking piece of legislation, thankfully on a mostly cross-party basis, but something which I think set up not just our country in the right direction, but got us influence around the world for being one of the first country to do this. It's why we doubled renewable deployment in our time, and actually, if the coalition were being fair, a lot of the credit they claim for the increase is actually things like the Round 3 offshore, which was actually put up in the pipeline by the last Labour government. And it's why we'll write the decarbonisation target for our power sector into law. These gentlemen here voted against that in the House of Commons. We'll have that decarbonisation target in there for 2030. And we'll give powers to the Green Investment Bank, and frankly, we won't have to indulge climate sceptics on our backbenches, banning onshore wind or undermining solar. And that's why I think we're in the strongest position. And as for that Paris 2015 conference, that treaty, that will be absolutely central to us in our foreign policy too. But also, and I think it's worth saying, Labour will keep us in the EU, because if anybody thinks we can tackle things like climate change on our own, we can leave it to America and China to agree these deals bilaterally, I'm sorry, but that is just not good enough. And actually what the Conservatives are proposing, always flirting with leaving the EU, is no future or way to tackle these problems. But there's something else as well, because frankly, parts of this agenda are expensive. There's no doubt coal right now is very cheap. It produces cheap energy if you just take it from that particular way to look at it. And actually, as we turn that off, there is pressure on bills. I actually believe if we just relied on fossil fuels, we'd have an even more difficult position in the future. But that surely puts an imperative on us as politicians and people running the energy market to make sure that energy market works well. I'm sure all of you are aware right now that gas wholesale prices are actually at their lowest since September 2010. I'm sure you're all aware that electricity wholesale prices are about 23% cheaper than they were this time last year. And I'm sure you know that because you've all had letters from your energy companies telling you with that fall in wholesale prices, they're going to lower your bills as well, yeah? Well, I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up because I can pretty much guess no one will have had a letter like that. Yet if it had gone the other way, you would have definitely been told and your bills would definitely have gone up. We must reform that energy market to make it more transparent, to put in more powers for the regulator, to make sure that people get the benefit of that. Because if we don't, frankly, we will undermine public support for this agenda. Now, I know in an audience like this, people who are very much motivated and care about these issues, you won't just be interested in the large parties, you'll also be perhaps looking towards the Greens or even smaller parties like the Liberal Democrats. But I think I've got a slightly tougher message for you, but I think it's one we simply have to debate tonight. Now, I work with lots of Green politicians from European parties, particularly places like Germany, where they're a big part of the political scene, and we don't have that to quite the same degree in this country. And actually, if we went through the reasons why, I'm not comfortable with a lot of Green Party policies, and I think what's happened in Brighton with the Green Council is in many ways a warning of what happens when people who aren't sure what they really want to do get in and create all kinds of problems, particularly for the workforce there. But there's one particular reason why I think that's the wrong way to go, and it's nuclear energy. And I know this is a difficult conversation for some people in the room, but I want to tackle it head on. I'd put it to you like this. Climate change is the biggest problem we face. Like Ed Davies said, maybe the biggest problem we have ever faced. Why would we not throw everything at it? And in nuclear energy, we have a low carbon, low emission, air quality improving technology that we know we can rely on. Now, people talk to me sometimes about nuclear waste. Look, every ounce of nuclear waste is under control, and actually we can probably reuse it for fuel. If only we could say the same about carbon emissions, who would just get pumped out there, wreaking all kinds of havoc. Now, if you compare the situation between those two things, frankly, I think we have to use nuclear energy. And by the way, on nuclear waste, think what we're going to do with some of our solar PV panels when they come to the end of their life. There are problems with waste with everything, and we ignore those at our peril. Look at the countries that have successfully decarbonised. France, Sweden, they've used nuclear power. And actually, let's take that a bit further, because everyone here, I'm sure, wants to see the expansion of our renewable deployment. Now, what we're going to make that out of? We're going to make it out of steel. Where we're going to get the power from to make that steel? It won't come from wind, it won't come from solar PV, and it certainly can't be done by energy efficiency. We need something to do that. It'll either be fossil fuels or it'll be nuclear. And my decision, therefore, is nuclear. And I think the worst thing to do would simply be to import that and pretend that we can ignore the carbon emissions that come from that in other countries. I see my time is up, so I will finish my pitch for Labour. And I'll put it like this. Not just that we're the only party that can successfully tackle climate change, but actually we're the only party willing to seize the other benefits, the other opportunities of doing so. Green government is also about good government, one that is safe and clean and prosperous. And that is what Labour will bring to the party. Thank you very much.